When I say I've played a ton of games in Pokemon Pocket, trust me, I've played a ton of games. With over 200 wins, about 210 damage dealt, and almost 600 points collected, I have partaken in my fair share of battles. And with that, I have also come across a ton of mistakes I've made. So in today's video, I'm going to share with new players my top 5 biggest mistakes that might be holding you back from winning more games in Pokemon Pocket. Hey guys, Zen here, and today we're going to overcome some common beginner mistakes that could help you lead to winning more games in Pokemon Pocket. These are mistakes that I've made that once I've corrected have definitely helped me improve my win rate in the game, and has honestly made the game more enjoyable. So with that, let's hop into the first one, and that's mistake number 1, playing way too many benched Pokemon at the start of the game, or not even respecting cards like Sabrina's ability to easily swap them out for the final point. Now, along with my coverage of these top 5 mistakes, I'll be sharing with you some gameplay footage so you can follow along there and see me actually put these suggestions and tips into action that leads to winning games, even against top meta decks like Mewtwo. Oh, and we're running Weezing and Melmetal. So yeah, back to the first mistake, and that's going to be playing way too many bench Pokemon at the start of the game. Now, if you're not running something like Pikachu EX, where the whole strategy is to swarm your bench, you really have to be methodical about what Pokemon you place on your bench. For example, if you play a Snorlax turn 1 and then something like a Melmetal in the bench, well, turn 1, turn 2, your opponent can easily Sabrina them and swap them in and now take out the Pokemon that you're hoping to win the game with. However, what I'm not suggesting is just leaving an active Pokemon by itself, because then you also have to respect cards like Misty and Articuno, who could punish you turn 1 for not playing any benched Pokemon. We do have some trainer cards that help you combat this, like the fossils that act like benched Pokemon that you can easily discard later on. However, a method that I like to do, and it has helped me win way more games, is making sure that I only place cards on my bench that are actually going to contribute to the game in some point. They're either going to just be, bodies and fodder that my opponent can knock out and get an easy point with while I ramp something else, or they're going to be integral to the actual strategy of winning the game. For example, if I have something like Snorlax up front, that's 150 HP. I don't have to worry about my opponent being able to knock them out in the first 2 turns unless they get like extremely lucky with some coin flips or something. So what I like to do, especially in this type of deck where I know my Melmetal is going to be my #1 winning card for this type of a battle, is I only play basic Pokemon when I have their evolutions in my hand. So that way, by the following turn, even if they Sabrina me out, I'm going to be able to evolve, or I can at least put an energy down, retreat them, and then evolve, and therefore waste a Sabrina from my opponent. So pretty much just make sure you're playing benched Pokemon appropriately, and you're not just throwing cards down, because you only have 3 spots. Your opponent only needs 3 points, and with cards like Sabrina and Pidgeot and future cards that are sure to come to the game, they can easily manipulate you playing so fast and playing so many cards into your bench and easily get your points out. Like, you can feed a Charizard, and by turn 3 or 4, they can just swap you out and knock out a basic Pokemon that's like 60 HP and win the game, even though you have cards that are so huge. Which brings me to the second mistake that I myself have made so much, and it revolves around using specific cards. Cards like Red Card, cards like Sabrina. Now, I've done this myself in the past, and I'm sure others have, but let's talk about Red Card real quick. Red Carding on turn 1 is almost always not the play and a huge gamble. Instead, using a card like Red Card after your opponent has played their Pokeballs or Professors puts you in a much greater spot of resetting and disrupting their hand size and also the cards that they just acquired. But on top of that, they also have already lost their means of drawing from their deck, putting them at a huge disadvantage because now they don't have any more Pokeballs or Professors. This is something that I've greatly made mistakes with in the past. Now, same with Sabrina, another card that I make so many mistakes with, as well as other trainer cards. Choosing when to play these cards can often lead to you winning or losing. For example, if your opponent has a full bench of Pokemon and you're using a Sabrina, oftentimes it's not going to really do much for you, because they can just choose to swap in a Pokemon that can only retreat for 1 cost, and also if they have X speed, then your Sabrina is pretty much useless, and they can just swap right back out and make you waste your Sabrina. Now for me, I personally love using Sabrina now as a late game finisher when my opponent only has Pokemon on their bench that my active Pokemon can 100% just knock out with one attack. So they can have something like a Mewtwo, and then I Sabrina and bring out their something like their Gardevoir or their Ralts and just win the game. You'll probably see that in today's matches on the side here. But with that being said, timing and utilization of your card is very important in this game. You don't just want to use cards for the sake of them unless there's something that helps you thin out your deck or actually gives you an advantage right then and there. There's a little bit of strategy to this card game. Who would have thought, right? Moving on to mistake number 3, and again, huge mistake of mine when I first started Pokemon Pocket, and that is not sequencing your actions properly. What do I mean by this? Well, we already talked about Pokeballs and Professors, right? In what order should you use them in? When the game first came out, I was using them in any order I wanted, but it obviously makes more sense to use your Pokeball first before your Professor if you have both those cards in your hands, so that way you can take out a basic Pokemon from that potential draw and that equation entirely. Then after your draw, you can assess which Pokemon is going to get the most benefit from retrieving an energy. Another mistake that I've made in the past, well, I've actually made multiple, but that is just giving an energy to a Pokemon, then drawing from my deck, and then realizing that that Pokemon that I just drew would benefit way more from that energy than the Pokemon that I just gave the energy to. And as of right now, once you attach an energy, there is no undo button, so you're kind of stuck with that choice. There is a redo button, however, at the start of the game. So if you put something down as an active Pokemon, you could swap out, but that doesn't matter. You can't redo your energy attachments, which greatly sucks. So you have to be very methodical and very precise of where you want the energy. Also, before you end your turn, make sure you use your energy. I'm sure we'll see in this video and multiple videos, I make that mistake still. But yeah, mistake number 3 is properly sequencing your actions and making sure you use all your resources accordingly. Because if you do this, it gives you all the information that you can possibly have to make the best choices for your turn, which typically puts you in the seat of control and not getting beat down. Next up is mistake number 4, and this is more of a preference. I mean, you do you play however you want, but this video is about not making mistakes to help you get more wins, right? So what we want is consistency over being a little too flippy. Now, don't get me wrong, I love flipping 10 heads with Misty just as much as the next gamer. But if you're looking to win more games, then building a deck that is at least 50-50 in terms of flips and consistency is definitely the way to go. Again, I'm not going to tell you to not play your flip coins, right? You can still play your Kinglers, your Sea Kings, but having something that has a little bit of consistency, like Golduck being on turn 2 if you go second, being able to just deal 70 is way more valuable than just having a full deck of Misty, Sea King, and Kingler. And you know, that's kind of it. You just flip coins. If you get lucky, you get lucky. So throwing in some consistency there is definitely a good call. Or else you're going to be at the mercy of Lady Luck, and let's just say she doesn't like me too much. All right, you guys have made it this far, which means we are at the mistake number 5, and this one is a huge one, and that is not understanding the current meta of the game. Now, there are so many different types of decks out there, but in a way to simplify this for new players, all you really need to be aware of are 4 main archetypes currently in the game. Now, we have Aggro, Control, Ramp, and Stall. Those are the 4, well, actually 5 if you include combo decks. Now, real quick, to help you better understand that, aggro are decks like your Blaine or your Water Aggro, which are pretty fast. You play cards. These typically consist of a ton of stage 1 Pokemon that just deal damage pretty fast. You're trying to win in like 3 to 5 turns. Now, I'll be honest, aggro decks feel really good to play, especially in a turbo fast card game like Pokemon Pocket. However, they are not the end-all be-all, because they can still get stomped by things like control decks. Control decks are those decks that slow down your opponent's strategies. Things like swapping out their active Pokemon with a Victory Bell, Pidgeot, Sabrinas, things that like sleeping their active Pokemon like Hypnos, Frostmoths, essentially putting down any sort of status affliction or just ruining their aggro fast approach. Now, we already touched on this a bit, but combo decks would be something like a combination of aggro and control, which are typically called tempo decks. Now, right off the top of my head, I can't think of any great overall, like outstanding tempo decks, but mixing these 2 archetypes can be very advantageous in the game. Then we have ramp decks. Now, these are going to be your Charizard Moltres, your Gardevoir Mewtwo EXs, and as long as you're pulling those cards from your deck, the cards that you need, these are really hard to stop because once you get going, like if you can ramp your turn 1 to turn 4 effectively, your opponent's going to have a very, very hard time. And then finally, my favorite archetype is Stall, which can be broken down into so many different categories itself. You can have Toxic Stall, you can have Sleep Stall, you can have pretty much any kind of stall that you want, high HP stalls. But the idea of this is having high HP Pokemon up in the active spot, wasting the first 5 or so turns, so that way your backline, your benched Pokemon can effectively get to the point where they can just one-shot all of your opponent's Pokemon. Now you still are, at a disadvantage to things like Sabrina and Control and stuff like that, and Aggro typically has a pretty good time into it. However, if you stall effectively and you get all the cards that you need, it's very hard to outstall a stall deck, essentially. But you'll notice all of these archetypes require you to actually have good cards in your deck to effectively win with those methods. But yeah, that's a pretty basic rundown of the current meta. Now, I definitely recommend getting familiar with each deck type and what they do and what they can offer and their weaknesses. But if you're a brand new player, just knowing what these archetypes are and what their play styles are is going to help you tremendously in countering them and having a better time winning more games in Pokemon Pocket. But yeah, there you guys have it. Those are my 5 common mistakes that beginner players are often making that are costing them a lot of wins and games. And if you put in the tips that I presented in this video, then I'm sure that you'll be able to increase your win rate, have way more fun, possibly even acquire way more resources like hourglasses to open up new packs with these new missions after global launch, and just honestly overall have way more fun in Pokemon Pocket. But with that, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and be sure to check out the rest of my channel for way more helpful beginner tips and guides and deck lists to help you have the most fun out of Pokemon Pocket. That's it. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.